impacted. I don't think we have enough kids in the school for a football team, right? And so privatization is kind of like, okay, we want more competition, we want more growth and stimulation in this area. We're gonna lift these rules and let people do what they want, right? And there's always a balance in between, right?
For stuff like gymnastics and whatnot, why don't they just have students and whatnot sign a waiver that they're liable for themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, you're under the age, right? So you can't
yeah,
really
They
sign
can
a
get
waiver,
their
right?
parents to do it.
Yeah.
Mission form.
It's a little like,
It's like a choice.
there's some gray area there, right? Schools make certain decisions on your behalf, right? School boards, right? Other times the decisions are made between you and your parents, right? And then there's gray area, right? So like, what happens if, and I mean, you almost injured your ankle yesterday, right? Okay, you consented to playing in a sport or consented to gym class. You were playing and you landed on someone's foot and you broke your ankle, right? Like, people injure themselves in gym class, it happens, or playing sports, right? There is some gray area, right? The challenge is, and we experienced that at this school earlier this semester on the Terry Fox Walk run day. I don't know if you kids heard, but yeah, group of students took a car, they were skipping class, driving a little too fast, took a turn too hard on a crappy road, and they rolled over. 4 kids could have died in that accident. Fortunately, no one did.
Oh, yeah, I know,
Right.
I know all of them.
Right.
personally.
Fortunately, no one did.
One of them flew
Pretty
out.
sure I said that.
I said it fortunately.
I'm pretty sure I said fortunately no one died.
One of them flew out of the window.
Yeah, some kid got thrown out of the car. They weren't wearing a seatbelt. Right.
Yeah.
So coming back to
They hit a rock and
like, do you
spun
want-
and pulled on it.
do you want lots of rules and regulations, or do you want none, right? Because like, what happens if multiple kids, you know, I'm pretty sure it happened when I was in high school, somebody got into an accident and died. They're kind of doing their own thing, right? They're just going off somewhere at lunch. But if they were going for a school event, do you want to have a rule in place that protects your athletes? Hey, we're gonna put you on a bus instead with a professional, with an adult driver, not professional, but an adult driver, right? So that's kind of this issue with privatization. So do you want more or less rules dictating what you can and can't do, right? Because if there's less rules, then you got to be worried. Somebody might scam you, right? Like, you might be the kid who gets into the car with someone and that person's doing crazy things. It happened to my cousin not that long ago. Either one. Let's hear you. Were you gonna ask as well?
Yeah.
He had his hand up first.
I'll go after.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, another thing that people experience or countries will experience at this point is called outsourcing. Just walk around back. Thank you. Okay. Outsourcing, your textbook defines this as the hiring of one company by another to fulfill a certain task. That doesn't really explain much of what this is. Outsourcing is basically saying like, hey, we're gonna go, like, look, it's a business practice of hiring someone outside of your company to perform jobs, to create goods that were traditionally performed in-house by the company. So how many of you have called because your internet wasn't working and like somebody picks up in India? How many of you have had that happen? Why are you laughing? That happens all the time, right? It's happened to you, right? Those internet service company, those providers, they outsource that labor. They go somewhere where it's cheaper, right? Where the cost of one employee here might pay for 3 in a different country. And they need that job, right, down there. And there's more competition, right? And maybe you can be a little more ruthless because there aren't nearly as good workers' laws. And because there's 5 people waiting to take your job, if you're not performing, right? Too bad, so sad, right? That's outsourcing. That's essentially what happened when, Thomas Sowell explains it. So in the 70s in Detroit, when they were building cars there, the government increased the taxes. It became too expensive to manufacture cars in America, so they outsourced. They started making cars in different parts of the world. Right? I don't know exactly where they went. All those jobs in Detroit disappeared. It was just too expensive to run their company. They just outsourced their labor, right? So a corporation has that capacity, right? A company has that capacity. They can just say, all right, we don't like what's going on here, we're just gonna go do it somewhere else where it's cheaper, right? Maybe they can get the same standard, maybe the standard drops for a bit, right? But that's essentially outsourcing, right? That's pretty reasonable, right? Like in your life as well, if you can outsource tasks, make things easier, right? Like I'm pretty sure there's things you do every single day, right? Every day you gotta get dressed and pick an outfit. A lot of you pick the same thing, right? A lot of you wear the same stuff to school, very similar, right? So you might outsource that decision making by just having less decisions to make, less clothes to wear, less options, right? Other people some people don't want to make coffee, spend that time in the morning. They outsource that labor to someone who works at Starbucks or McDonald's or Tim Hortons, right? And they pay someone else to do that work for them, right? So people do this at an individual level, and corporations do this. Maybe governments do this as well, right? Sometimes governments don't want to do certain jobs. They don't have the skill set. They find a company that can, a person with the skill set who can, and they make them do that work. Here are some of the benefits for outsourcing, because a lot of people just think it's bad, but a company might be able to provide faster services. You might be able to outsource your human resources, so get people hired from elsewhere where there's more workers. Okay? You might be able to find someone with higher skill elsewhere, right? Payroll, there's stuff there. Customer support's a big one, especially for technological tech companies, right? You outsource all of your customer support stuff, customer service to somewhere where labor is cheap, right? And then you can hire 5 people for the price of 1 here. Okay. Digital marketing as well, that might also go tie in with high skills, that you find people in other parts of the world who are very good at this skill, and then you get them to do that same job, and you can pay them less, right? When a business requires specialized skills, often it may be better to find an expert rather than learn that skill on your own. So for example, a lot of people who are very wealthy, they'll pay someone else to do their taxes, right? They just don't have time to learn all the ins and outs of the tax system, figure that out on their own. They'll just pay someone else to do it. Okay. It's like he's playing with his watch, but he's fast asleep there. Okay. Content creation, editing, all this kind of stuff. Like sometimes it's better to just outsource that task to someone who understands it better and can do it quicker and pay them for their service rather than learning that skill yourself. But regardless, there is something useful in having knowledge of that skill yourself, so you can kind of differentiate between people who are good at their job and people who are bad at their job. Right? You want to still have that. There's a particular word for that. The ability to distinguish between good quality and bad quality, right? And that takes a certain level of knowledge and skill. But to get to the highest level, you really have to dedicate yourself to a particular thing. Well, if you create content and come up with ideas, if that's your highest level skill, you might not be able to get your editing skills nearly as high, right? So you just find someone who is really good at that. That's another way that people outsource. Here's a couple of reasons why companies might outsource. So most companies, to reduce their costs. Okay, and there's a question there. What might cause a company's production costs to go up? Why might it cost a company more money to produce the same product? Could be inflation.
The materials made for it.
Say that again.
The materials made for it. Materials.
Access to resources and materials might go up. If there's less demand, your product might cost less, but not necessarily. What else might cause your production cost to go up?
The government might put taxes on it.
That's likely going to be a big one, right? The government steps in and maybe they put a new law or regulation in place. It costs you more to make the same stuff. Yes?
How rare the resources.
Rarity as well, accessibility, right? I think we mentioned that with that point there. Another one is to focus on the core business, right? I've done this myself as a coach, right? I have 3 extra people there who help me out, and they all have their own skill sets, and I let them focus on their skill sets and do what they're good at, and I do what I'm good at, right? So to be able to focus on the value that you bring as an individual, sometimes you got to find a team of people that have their own skill set and value, and let them do what they're good at, so you can do what you're good at. Capacity issues, so maybe there's not enough work. Enhancing service quality, we already talked about that. A lot of people, their customer support goes to some foreign country, right? You're likely not speaking to someone in Canada, right? Perhaps not. You know, and there's a couple other reasons there as well. One of the negatives of outsourcing can be when a company closes its doors, which means it takes those jobs and they go somewhere else. This leaves gaps in the job market for the initial community. This happened to one of my relatives in Ontario. When he migrated, he didn't have a lot of education, so as he came over to Canada, he had to work lower skilled jobs. And when that manufacturing left Ontario, when it left Toronto, it left some spaces for a lot of people who didn't have the skill set to work different jobs. They might have been too old to adapt, or just unable to adapt to that change. And anytime there's outsourcing and a company leaves, you're gonna have a lull where a lot of people don't know what they're supposed to be doing, don't know how to adapt and improvise to that situation. Hopefully over time, new jobs are created for those people to be successful in. This is our last slide, and I'll give you time